Alone, far in the wilds and mountains I hunt, wandering amazed at my own lightness and glee. In the late afternoon, choosing a safe spot to pass the night, kindling a fire and broiling the fresh-killed game, soundly falling asleep on the gathered leaves, my dog and gun by my side. The Yankee clipper is under her 3 sky sails. She cuts the sparkle and scud. My eyes settle the land. I bend at her prow or shout joyously from the deck. The boatmen and clam diggers arose early and stopped for me. I tucked my trouser ends in my boots and went and had a good time. You should have been with us that day round the chowder kettle. I saw the marriage of the trapper in the open air in the far west. The bride was a red girl. Her father and his friends sat nearby, cross-legged and dumbly smoking. They had moccasins to their feet and large, thick blankets hanging from their shoulders. On a bank lounged the trapper. He was dressed mostly in skins. His luxuriant beard and curls protected his necks. One hand rested on his rifle. The other hand held firmly the wrist of the red girl. She had long eyelashes. Her head was bare. Her coarse, straight locks descended upon her voluptuous limbs and reached to her feet. The runaway slave came to my house and stopped outside. I heard his motions crackling the twigs of the woodpile. Through the swung half-door of the kitchen, I saw him limpsy and weak, and went where he sat on a log, and led him in and assured him, and brought water, and filled a tub for his sweated body and bruised feet, and gave him a room that entered from my own, and gave him some coarse, clean clothes, and remember perfectly well his revolving eyes and his awkwardness, and remember putting plasters on the galls of his neck and ankles. He stayed with me a week before he was recuperated and passed north. I had him sit next to me at table. My firelock leaned in the corner. 28 young men bathed by the shore. 28 young men, and all so friendly. 28 years of womanly life, and all so lonesome. She owns the fine house by the rise of the bank. She hides handsome and richly dressed aft the blinds of the window. Which of the young men does she like the best? Ah, the homeliest of them is beautiful to her. Where are you off to, lady? For I see you. You splash in the water there, yet stay stock still in your room. Dancing and laughing along the beach came the 29th bather. The rest did not see her, but she saw them and loved them. Where? Dancing and laughing along the beach. No. The beards of the young men glistened with wet. It ran from their long hair. Little streams passed all over their bodies. An unseen hand also passed over their bodies. It descended tremblingly from their temples and ribs. The young men float on their backs. Their white bellies swell to the sun. They do not ask who seizes fast to them. They do not know who puffs and declines with pendant and bending arch. They do not think whom they soothe with spray. The butcher boy puts off his killing clothes, sharpens his knife at the stall in the market. I loiter, enjoying his repartee and his shuffle and breakdown. Blacksmith with grimed and hairy chests, and Viron the anvil. Each has his main sledge. They're all out. There is a great heat in the fire. From the cinder-strewed threshold I follow their movements. The lithe sheer of their waists plays even with their massive arms. Overhand the hammers roll, overhand so slow, overhand so sure. They do not hasten. Each man hits in his place. The Negro holds firmly the reins of his 4 horses. The block swags underneath on its tied-over chain. The Negro that drives the huge dray of the stone yard. Steady and tall he stands, poised on one leg on the string piece. His blue shirt exposes his ample neck and breast and loosens over his hip band. His glance is calm and commanding. He tosses the slouch of his hat away from his forehead. The sun falls on his crispy hair and mustache, falls on the black of his polished and perfect limbs. I behold the picturesque giant, and I love him, and I do not stop there. I go with the team also. In me, the caresser of life, wherever moving, backward as well as forward slewing, to niches aside and junior bending. Oxen that rattle the yoke or halt in the shade, what is it that you express in your own eyes? It seems to me more than all the print I have read in my life. My tread scares the wood drake and wood duck on my distant and day-long ramble. They rise together. They slowly circle around. I believe in the winged purposes. and acknowledge the red, yellow, and white playing within me, and consider the green and violet, and the tufted crown intentional, and do not call the tortoise unworthy because she is not something else. And the mockingbird in the swamp never studied the gamut, yet trills pretty well to me. And the look of the bay mare shames silliness out of me. The wild gander leads his flock through the cool night. "Ya honk," he says, and sounds it down to me like an invitation. The pert may suppose it meaningless, but I listen closer. I find its purpose and place up there toward the November sky. The sharp-toothed moose of the north, the cat on the house sill, the chickadee, the prairie dog, the litter of the grunting sows, they tug at her teats. The brood of the turkey hen, and she with her half-spread wings, I see in them and myself the same old law. The press of my foot to the earth springs 100 affections. They scorn the best I can do to relate them. I am enamored of growing outdoors, of men that live among cattle or taste of the ocean or woods, of the builders and steerers of ships, of the wielders of axes and mauls, of the drivers of horses. I can eat and sleep with them week in and week out. What is commonest and cheapest and nearest and easiest is me going in for my chances, spending for vast returns, adorning myself to bestow myself on the first that will take me, not asking the sky to come down to my goodwill, scattering it freely forever. The pure contralto sings in the organ loft. The carpenter dresses his plank. The tongue of his foreplane whistles its wild ascending lisp. The married and unmarried children ride home to their Thanksgiving dinner. The pilot seizes the kingpin. He heaves down with a strong arm. The mate stands braced in the whaleboat. Lance and harpoon are ready. The duck shooter walks by, silent and cautious stretches. The deacons are ordained with crossed hands at the altar. The spinning girl retreats and advances to the hum of the big wheel. The farmer stops by the bars of a Sunday and looks at the oats and rye. The lunatic is carried at last to the asylum, a confirmed case. He will never sleep any more as he did in the cot in his mother's bedroom. The Jower printer with grey head and gaunt jaws works at his case. He turns his quid of tobacco. His eyes get blurred with the manuscript. The malformed limbs are tied to the anatomist's table. What is removed drops horribly in a pail. The quadroon girl is sold at the stand. The drunkard nods by the barroom stove. The machinist rolls up his sleeves. The policeman travels his beat. The gatekeeper marks who pass. The young fellow drives the express wagon. I love him, though I do not know him. The half-breed straps on his light boots to compete in the race. The western turkey shooting draws old and young. Some lean on their rifles, some sit on logs. Out from the crowd steps the marksman and takes his position and levels his piece. The groups of newly come immigrants cover the war for levy. The woolly pates, hoe in the sugar field. The overseer views them from his saddle. The bugle calls in the ballroom. The gentleman runs for their partner. The dancers bow to each other. The youth lie awake in the cedar-roofed garret and harks to the musical rain. The wolverine sets traps on the creek that help fill the Huron. The reformer ascends the platform. He spouts with his mouth and nose. The company returns from its excursion. The darky brings up the rear and bears the well-riddled target. The squaw, wrapped in her yellow-hemmed cloth, is offering moccasins and bead bags for sale. The connoisseur peers along the exhibition gallery, with half-shut eyes bent sideways. The deckhands make fast the steamboat. The plank is thrown for the shore-going passengers. The young sister holds out the skein. The elder sister winds it off in a ball and stops now and then for the knots. The one-year wife is recovering and happy. A week ago she bore her first child. The clean-haired Yankee girl works with her sewing machine or in the factory or mill. The 9 months gone is in the parturition chamber. Her faintness and pains are advancing. The paving man leads on his two-handed rammer. The reporter's lead flies swiftly over the notebook. The sign painter is lettering with red and gold. The canal boys trot on the towpath. The bookkeeper counts at his desk. The shoemaker waxes his thread. The conductor beats time for the band, and all the performers follow him. The child is baptized, the convert is making the first professions. The regatta is spread on the bay, how the white sails sparkle. The drover watches his drove, he sings out to them that would stray. The peddler sweats with his pack on his back, the purchaser higgles about the odd cent. The camera and plate are prepared, the lady must sit for her daguerreotype. The bride unrumples her white dress, the minute hand of the clock moves slowly. The opium eater reclines with rigid head and just opened lips. The prostitute draggles her shawl, her bonnet bobs on her tipsy and pimpled neck. The crowd laugh at her blackguard oaths. The men jeer and wink to each other. Miserable. I do not laugh at your oaths, nor jeer at you. The president holds a cabinet council. He is surrounded by the great secretaries. On the piazza walk 5 friendly matrons with twined arms. The crew of the fish smack pack repeated layers of halibut in the hold. The Missourian crosses the plains, toting his wares and his cattle. The fare collector goes through the train. He gives notice by the jingling of loose change. The floormen are laying on the floor. The tinners are tinning the roof. The masons are calling for mortar. In single file, each shouldering his hod, pass onward the laborers. Seasons pursuing each other, the indescribable crowd is gathered. It is the 4th of July. What salutes of cannons and small arms. Seasons pursuing each other, the plower plows and the mower mows and the winter grain falls in the ground. Off on the lakes, the pike fisher watches and waits by the hole in the frozen surface. The stumps stand thick round the clearing, the squatter strikes deep with his axe. The flatboatmen make fast towards dusk, near the cottonwood or pecan trees. The coon seekers go now through the regions of the Red River, or through those drained by the Tennessee, or through those of the Arkansas. The torches shine in the dark that hangs on the Chattahoochee, or Altahama. Patriarchs sit at supper with sons and grandsons and great-grandsons around them. In walls of adobe, in canvas tents, rest hunters and trappers after their day's sport. The city sleeps and the country sleeps. The living sleep for their time. The dead sleep for their time. The old husband sleeps by his wife, and the young husband sleeps by his wife. And these one and all tend inward to me, and I tend outward to them. And such as it is to be of these, more or less I am. I am of old and of young, of the foolish as much as the wise, regardless of others, ever regardful of others, maternal as well as paternal, a child as well as a man, stuffed with the stuff that is coarse, and stuffed with the stuff that is fine. One of the great nations, the nation of many nations, the smallest the same and the largest the same, a southerner soon as a northerner, a planter nonchalant and hospitable, a Yankee bound by my own way, ready for trade, my joints the limberest joints on earth and the sternest joints on earth, a Kentuckian walking the vale of the Elkhorn in my deerskin leggings, a boatman over the lakes or bays or along coasts, a Hoosier, a Badger, a Buckeye, a Louisian, a Georgian, a pokeezy from sandhills and pines, at home on Canadian snowshoes or up in the bush, or with fishermen off Newfoundland, at home with the fleet of ice boats sailing with the rest and tacking, at home on the hills of Vermont or in the woods of Maine or the Texan ranch, comrade of raftsmen and coalmen, comrade of all who shake hands and welcome to drink and meat, a learner with the simplest, a teacher of the thoughtfulest, a novice beginning experiment of myriad of seasons, of every hue and trade and rank, of every castle and religion, not merely of the New World, but of Africa, Europe, or Asia, a wandering savage, a farmer, mechanic, or artist, a gentleman, sailor, lover, or Quaker, a prisoner, fancy man, rowdy, lawyer, physician, or priest.